Hello, and welcome to the Constance Messmer podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, today I have something really weird to share with you. Sometimes when you're working in the spirit realm and you come across a being that seems, you know, like a lower entity or troublesome spirit, sometimes they're not really real. They're actually projections. That's the topic I want to talk to you about. So, whether you're a medium or a psychic working in the field, or you're conversing in your own sitting in stillness time with connecting with spirit, this is something you need to know about. Really, truly, it's pretty fascinating. Whether you're doing work for yourself and on yourself, or you're working, delivering messages to another, you need to know about projections. All right. So, that is the topic of our conversation today. I am Constance Messmer. Thank you so much for tuning in. So one time a woman came to me and wanted a session, a mediumship session, kind of combo extraction or kind of an exorcism out of her energetic space. Her husband had recently passed, and in life he was really tricky to deal with. And she really felt he was haunting her still, kind of impregnating her thoughts with his own old dialogue and actually monologue, really disparaging thoughts, stuff like that. And so she called me up wanting some help to kind of banish him from her psychic space, if you will. So she came over, we started in on the session, and I didn't have her tell me anything more. I looked around her energetic space and I came across the husband. I saw him very clearly, exactly what he looked like before he passed, gave her messages that were confirmation that it was him, and described him, also described what he was saying, the consistency of the berating thoughts. You'll never amount to anything. Why do you even try? You might as well give up. This isn't really, not your forte, where you're headed. You can't succeed, all of these things. And I was like, wow, this is a real, he's berating her. And it felt awful to deal with him. And I just started tuning in, like she could confirm, yep, these are the thoughts I've been having. And she was in the bubble. No, he was in the bubble of her auric field, pretty much. And the more I listened, the more I was like, there's something wrong here. I was using ClairSensation to see how it felt, not my connection, because I knew the connection was solid to what I was speaking to, but I was more so using it as a tool to tune into him and him as a spirit. And when I was doing that, I was like, there's something not right with this guy. Like, I had worked with a lot of people on the other side, and I was just like, he felt like flat. And I tried to look at that point a little flat, like to see energetically, did he have dimension? And I had, like, did he look three-dimensional or two-dimensional? That was pretty much it. And I realized when I was like trying to look to the side of him, he was more two-dimensional. And I was like, wait a minute, this is people on the other side that have passed. When I see them clairvoyantly, they look three-dimensional. They look like they have girth because that's where they exist for now, whatever, or in that space that I'm connecting to them. It's a whole other story, right? Whether they've come back or moved on to other realms. Anyway, so this guy in particular, I was like, wow, he's kind of flat. Now, meanwhile, I could feel the energy of her sadness and his oddity. And I was like, this doesn't feel like the husband. And I was like, wait, where is the husband if this doesn't feel like the husband? And by that, I mean, it just didn't feel like it was a true representation of the husband, even though he was berating. And oftentimes when I've worked with people that have crossed, they go through a soul review and then they've changed. They've kind of grown up emotionally, more mature, and they see the errors of their ways. And they often come across actually apologizing for being that horrible in this incarnation. But this guy wasn't. And I was like, when I realized he only had two dimensions, he was flat. I was like, wait, if this isn't the husband, where's the husband? And I like was looking around and I followed this thread of light way up in the corner of my then treatment room. And I saw this bright light and he was like, I'm the husband. And I was like, wait, if you're the husband, then who's this guy? And it was the awareness of, oh my God, it's her projection. This is her stuff. She's made this story up as a thought, and wait for it, to hold her back, to allow her not to carry on, to believe what he was saying as, the God's honest truth or whatever. And I was like, wait a minute. And the second that I said that to her, I said, this is not your husband that you're hearing. These are projected thoughts that you've actually materialized and manifested an entity that seems like a kind of a lower entity or a troublesome spirit that kind of has a hold on your mental space or your psychic space, your psyche, if you will. But that's not real. That's your playing the old tapes and feeling him around in this old way when he's moved on. Like he's not that. He's this, he has kind of transitioned to this brighter space of awareness. When I said that to her, she was like, what? And in that moment, I threw light at the two-dimensional husband and he kind of vanished. He kind of dissipated. And it was just kind of like little bits. So I knew in that moment, wait for it, that she hadn't completely let go because she hadn't forgiven him of how he had been to her, right, in this life, and that she'd put up with it for so long. So I, meanwhile, asked the real husband in spirit to come closer to see if I could relay any messages from him. And he did. He kept his distance, kind of, if that makes any sense. He was still, sometimes when I tune in to loved ones that have crossed, they'll come really close to the person I'm delivering the messages to. But this guy kind of stayed at a distance. And I said, this is what your real husband wants to say. I said, but you have to understand he went through a soul review. And so he's very apologetic. And, it's a little too late, but he needs to send this healing love and these words to you. So he went on and apologized and recognized and said, I know I didn't believe in you in the way that I should have and needed to. That was my journey in this lifetime, but you have everything you possibly need to get the job done, be who you're meant to be. And in fact, you're quite magnanimous. And I only, find joy in the radiant presence that is you. And it was this major relief and release on both of their parts. Now, whether the information could land on her was not his agenda. His agenda was to get it off his kind of soul chest so that he could, move on and continue to actually help her in ways that he couldn't have before. And he asked if he could, help make paths clearer and things come together if she would only reach out and ask him. She was hesitant to actually refer and rely on him in the future for help, but in any other way other than kind of like, you owe me this, which works too. It works too, because he was beholden to her to a degree. So it was a very fascinating experience for me, in that I was, just having to sort and source that information and how it was so different. The one being that presented as a true being, but wasn't really real at all, but was instead, a reflection of her own projection. So I want to tell you more. I want to tell you more about it. So, what more could I possibly tell you about that whole experience? Well, the problem would have been had I stayed with that projection and read it as true. And that would have been interesting because I don't know that it was kind of this Um, because it wasn't really an entity and it was her own thoughts kind of carrying on the verbiage and the kind of the broken tape that the husband had done in the lifetime together. I don't know that it would have resolved for her as much as it did, because we spoke later. I did a check-in on her later and she was like, wow, that was phenomenal. And now I catch those thoughts and I recognize what it's about, and I'm not haunted anymore by them, right? So unfortunately, I think sometimes people might have a tendency to think that that's a lower entity, and not recognize that it's not really real. So the problem could be is if you believe it as real, and the solution is to pause, always pause, especially when you're getting information for yourself or others, delivering information as truth to others. You always need to use every possible bit of the 11 senses that I've taught you that you can, so that you can really feel your way along the information and source it, and feeling it, clear sensation, clearing it, feeling it, you know clear sentiment, like how does it register in your heart? Does it feel emotionally elating, or does it feel like disparaging, and follow that thread? Or how does the connection feel? Does it feel good? Does it feel like with this guy, it felt, I was like, something's flat or something's wrong. The way the delivery was coming, it was just like this kind of, just this broken record thing. And so I was paying attention to those subtle details, right? And then, of course, clairvoyantly, when I was looking and going, oh my God, this thing is flat, you're flat. So for me, that's how it often presents. I have to check projections or wishes or mental embellishments. Like when I'm seeing them in someone else's field, do they look and appear as humans or forms, but do they appear two-dimensionally? When I see them with girth and as three-dimensional, then for me, I know that they're who they say they are. So this might be another way for you to try to source and sort information when it's feeling a little funky and odd. I would also caution, of course, always when someone comes in, whether in your own, meditation time, or your own seeking answers and sourcing answers time, or doing reads for someone else or working with someone else, I would always pay attention, big red flag if the information from the spirit is negative, 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 negative. Wait a second. Because that you've got to check that, because if it's a higher being, they're not going to come in with any negativity. And certainly in your own meditation time and sourcing, spirit guides or angels, they're not going to be negative, negative, negative. They might be like, Constance, you're putting this project off. We've been after you. You said you wanted help on this project, and we're saying now's the time. The floodgates are going to open. Here comes the inspiration. Don't delay. What are you running for? That kind of stuff. But they won't be worthless. What are you doing? That kind of stuff is not, it's not helpful. You want to tune in to helpful friends. So I think the problem is sometimes people read those or tune into those and either turn away and don't ever do it again, or tune in and think, oh, this must be the husband. I'm going to deliver this information. She resonates with it. It's fine. Now, where do I go from here? And, how do we smudge and incense the, bejesus out of everything? And maybe I need to do a clearing at her house and blah, blah, blah. It's not that. Although sometimes you do need to say, you know what? You're feeling like the energy's still around and you're ready to turn over a new leaf. Why don't you open up all the doors and windows and do a little smudge and do a toning or doing chanting or prayer, holy water, all the bits to kind of just reclaim your space, paint the walls, whatever you want, fresh flowers, these kind of things. But when it's a projection and you're recognizing that, oh, this is something that this person's psyche has manifested in their space, or you have manifested in your space based on fears or old thought patterns, that's when you have to really look at it and wrestle with that and recognize, what's the solution to this problem. And often when I was doing sessions, or even in my own time, I'll ask, what's the solution to this problem? Always ask, right? Always goosebumps. always ask, because the answer will come. The answer will come through your 11 senses. It'll come as a knowing or a guidance or just a feeling or a words, or you'll see yourself moving into the actions of like, okay, and it'll, if you ask what's the solution, you'll get guidance on it, whether it's immediately or over the next few days. It'll tumble into your awareness, because when we ask, especially when we tune up and ask really high up, not the weirdo entity that you're like tuning into and going, something's wrong here. But when you ask higher still, you're going to get a solution to, what you should do or what needs to happen or what is this about. And always trust the first thing that comes up. You pose the question, the answer comes back. And so I think the best thing that you can do is pause, right? Is pause and say, something's not right here. This doesn't feel comfortable. Do I really need to listen to this person? Do I really need to listen to this negative being? That's the question, right? So sometimes the answer is no, you don't need to listen at all. Turn your attention away, because if they are a lesser entity, then, say, go to the light, I have no time for you. But if they stick around, it may be because they're your own stuff, or the person that you're reading, it's their stuff. And you need to kind of use some other skill sets. For me, it was, where is the being? Is it in their auric field? Because if they're in their auric field, it could be a projection or a wish. Wishful thinking is a whole nother thing. I might get that into that next. And so you might be reading a wish, you might be reading a projection, or if they're outside, if it's a being that shows up or a scenario that shows up outside of their auric field, then you might ask them to turn around if you're seeing them clairaudiently or clairvoyantly. Or if you're, when you're listening clairaudiently, you're going to pay attention to how they sound and everything. So do you have to listen to them? Do you have to give them airtime? What if you come across a being that is a loved one that is crossed, who's not so lovable? I have come across that. And I then have to recognize, oh, this is not a projection. This is really that person, this bossy pants, or this troublesome or not helpful at all in any way, right? And so I don't have my mic on. Isn't that hilarious? This is me turning the mic on. Okay, now I think the mic is on. Maybe the mic is out of sound. Look at this, what's happening that I don't have sound. Maybe it's a battery's out. Anyway, I cracked me up. I need so much help. So anyway, la la la. So do you need to listen to them? Well, sometimes you do, because sometimes you have to recognize, and you just have to deliver their words with compassion to the sitter, that, oh, this person is not nice and they're not going to change, and that's who they were and that's who they are. And then you go outside of that experience to deliver the content. You pull back and say, I need higher guidance because this is not a helpful being. And that was a hard relationship they went through. And then tuning in and getting helpful guidance, even for yourself or for others. If you're doing a read or a session or a mediumship session, you could say, I need help here. I need higher guide or higher being that's aligned with this whole scenario that can help me translate in a way. And oftentimes, I've gone into this form of, I don't know, it's just probably just inspired stuff channeling, where I say, listen, I'm getting that this is how they are. They're not going to change. They don't feel like they're ready for a soul review because they don't want to look at all the crud that they layered on everybody around them. And so maybe you give it time, maybe you let it go, maybe you move on, maybe you just process it as best you can on your own, but they're not apologizing because they're just really stuck. They're really stuck. And so, the only thing maybe sometimes we can do in that situation is throw light at them and beam light at them and, let them go. And every time we think of them, instead of throwing daggers of anger, throw light and say, whatever, go away. I have no time for you. So those are the only times that I actually give them a little bit of airtime, when I realize they're not a projection, that they really are who they say they are, and they're just jerks. They're just jerks. that's only with loved ones that have crossed, or not so loved ones that have crossed, right? Um, I never get that in my own time sitting with spirit, sourcing answers, because I go higher. It's always about intention, people. So when you're getting sourcing kind of answers for yourself, you just go highest of the high, connected to the highest truth, and make sure that the information comes in a gentle and loving way, because that's how upper guides speak, and you just skip that lower entity arena. Yeah. So next time, or if you ever run across this, definitely try these tips. Make sure you're paying attention to the style of information that's coming through, the flow of it, the connection. Ask them to turn, feel your way along. Like, does this feel good? Does it feel enlightening? Is it helpful? Or are they berating and it's not good? And what do I do about this? What is this? And don't ask them what is what are you? Ask your highest source self, or ask source energy, what is this? What's going on? And kind of disconnect from them. I didn't have to have her disconnect from the projection. The projection went and dissolved and resolved once she realized, oh, I can see how I've been carrying out his story or his way of being with me or dealing with me as a way to avoid living my path, living my truth, being true to myself, shining my greatest light. It doesn't matter that he didn't believe in me in our lifetime together, not as much as I know I'm a believable course of action. I'm fiery, kind of source of light on my own. It's about really believing in yourself. So, um, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to ask, what is this? When you come across something like that. And if and noticing, oh, what if I've made this up? What's the agenda? Why did I make it up? Why would I do that? Oh, it's stopping me in some way. What's it stopping me from doing? Oh, I see. I see. These are questions to source and sort on your own. It's not easy to kind of accept what might come back as answers and awareness, but it's going to be really important. And it's especially important if you're delivering this information in a mediumship session or as a conduit for someone else. You really have to be on the lookout for the connection and where it might be going awry and why that might be the case. And, who or what you're really tuning into. It's really important. You have to have, kind of that inner counsel with yourself. Like, when I started my work back in the day, I said, I'm going to handle anything you give to me, Source, because I know I'm backed by you and I know I can always turn to you for the answers and the resolution and the what to do next. Doesn't mean I'm always going to say, yes, I'll help you, but I often say, I'll give it a go. Sometimes I say that's not my arena of work. That's not my area of expertise. And I don't want to pretend to go there, because I don't pretend. I don't pretend, but I'm good at communication. So anyway, I adore you. I love you. I'm really grateful for you. And don't run from projections. Face them head on and be like, what is this about? Okay, so if you liked this episode, please share the love. Share it, like it, whatever, subscribe. That would be great. All those things would be great. And consider maybe joining as a member on the YouTube channel so you could help me sustain this content. That would be fabulous. Meanwhile, definitely put the content into practice to help make your life and our world a better place. Thank you so much for tuning in. Truly, 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 I really appreciate you. Hilarious. So my mic wasn't off. I'm like, dude, are you sure you got the right person for this work? It's so hilarious. Ah!
Legally speaking, this podcast is presented solely for educational, spiritual, and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for medical diagnosis, treatment, or the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. You should not use this information to diagnose or treat a health problem or condition. Always check with your doctor. Thank you.